Okay, great. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Nigel, for that very kind introduction, and thank you for having us here today to talk. I'm Lauren,
I'm Dante.
and today we're going to talk about Skagen as a birding hotspot and kind of take you through the spring migration in Skagen. So Skagen is a small town in North Jutland, in Denmark, and Denmark as a whole is kind of at a similar latitude to Scotland, and Skagen is the same latitude as Inverness, so it's fairly far north. But Skagen itself is a town. It's kind of quite a touristy town. A lot of wealthy Danes have their second homes there, and the population actually doubles over the summer. And the Skagen recording area as a whole comprises of the town, and then a large Atlantic heathland to the south of the town, and then a large pine plantation. And then to the north of the town, we've got the reserve, which is mainly kind of like wet willow scrub and big reed beds. And then the tip of the peninsula ends in this kind of complex dune system. So there's been a massive amount of change in the coastal topography of the tip of Skane over the last 50 years. The coastline has really eroded away on this side. And then there's a lot more vegetation and dunes on kind of like the north side. And they even had to move the lighthouse at one point, like it eroded away that badly. Pictures. Denmark as a whole is a very flat country. I think the highest point is only like 170 meters above sea level. There's very little natural forest at all, and they have no cliffs or mountains really. So it's a very arable country. And so, in many ways, you might think that the breeding birds in Denmark are going to be quite similar to like Norway and Sweden and the rest of Scandinavia. But in fact, it's actually a lot more like, say, the Netherlands. Um, So away from the migration season, a lot of the resident and breeding species are quite similar to those in the UK. But obviously, it is part of continental Europe, so there are some exceptions to this. So Denmark has breeding redneck grebes, crested larks. They have one pair, white-spotted blue throats, extreme warblers, short-toed tree creepers, and then my personal favorites, black woodpeckers. So they breed in Denmark. They're fairly rare in Skagen, but we got lucky enough to see one in 2023. And these are just phenomenal birds. They're like the size of a crow. So it was a really cool thing to see. But Skagen is a migration hotspot, and that is what we're going to focus on today. And many of the species we're going to talk about are kind of considered Skagen specialities. And in spring, the peninsula forms a migratory bottleneck. So it kind of funnels all the passerines, waders, and raptors along this peninsula until they cross the tip over to Sweden. And the tip of the peninsula is only 60 kilometers from Sweden. In 2017, a bird observatory was set up, so Skagen Fugl Station or Skagen Bird Observatory, and it houses up to 5 or 6 volunteers at a time from all around the world, and you're based in the Grey Lighthouse. And so in 2023, Dante and I volunteered there from early March to mid-July. This was my first spring in Skagen, and it was Dante's third after time there in 2018 and 2019. So as volunteers at Skagen Bird Observatory, our main role is morning observations or kind of like migration counts. And this is kind of standardized counting of all the migratory birds from sunrise. So we could choose where to do our morning observations. The two most popular sites are Verdens End, which means World's End, and that's kind of in the middle, you can see. And it gives a really good overview of like the sea, the passerines, the raptors. And then another really popular site is Nordstrand, which is at the top of the map. And that offers really close views of like sparrowhawks and harriers in particular. So the Vismig in Skagen is very weather dependent. For us, March started off very cold, and there was a lot of snow, and often we were absolutely freezing doing our counts. But in general, warm weather is considered the best for migration, and then easterly winds push migratory birds into Denmark and up towards Sweden that way, rather than going up through the Baltic countries. So there are some quieter days in Skagen, I guess, as there are in all Vismig sites, but there's also some extremely kind of mental busy days. At first, when I got there, I found it quite overwhelming. You're trying to watch the sea, you're trying to keep an eye on the passerines, you're trying to watch the raptors, and there's just like layers and layers of birds moving. And you can scope out to sea and then just see like 100 finches like passing behind some seabirds. So yeah, it was quite chaotic to start with, but I think we definitely both learned a lot being there. And here's just a few like crazy notebook pages. So on to the actual migration. We'll kind of start off in March and kind of roughly take you through the spring. And corvids are one of the groups that start to move or kind of build up in big numbers early in the year. It's mainly hooded crows and jackdaws, but you also get good numbers of ravens as well. And they form these massive flocks, which just fly up and down the peninsula pretty much all day. The corvids are very reluctant to actually head out kind of over the sea into Sweden. Some of them do migrate out. There's some ringing controls of like a magpie that was caught in Norway later that day. So a few do go, but they mainly just fly up and down, which makes them quite challenging to count. But a group that does actually migrate are the swans. It's mainly Hooper swans, kind of early in March and April, but you also get smaller numbers of Buick swans. And in 2023, I think we had the record count with 47 in a day. So that was quite special to see. So different species of geese continue to move throughout the spring. Kind of start off in March with grey lags, pink-footed geese, white-fronted geese, and smaller numbers of bean geese. You can see 3 different species in this photo. And then later in the spring, you get bigger numbers of Brent geese and barnacle geese as well. And pretty much all the wildfowl move east. You get big numbers of common scoter, kind of resting off the tip of Skagen, like absolutely huge flocks. And their peak migration is in April. I think the record count is like 41,000 birds moving in a day. And they're mainly common scoter, but you do get smaller numbers of velvet scoter as well. And sometimes these scoter flocks hold kind of nicer species. So you can see an adult male surf scoter in the center of this picture. And black scoter are pretty much annual in Skagen as well. So big numbers of widgeon, teal, and eider move past Skagen, alongside kind of smaller numbers of pintail, gadwall, gargany, and long-tailed ducks as well. And then smew are considered a bit rarer, but Dante wanted to include this nice picture of 2 female smew that he saw in 2019. So in terms of the sea watching, Skagen represents kind of the meeting of the 2 seas, so the Skagerrak and the Kattegat, and it provides excellent sea watching as birds enter and leave the Baltic Sea. And in particular, the first calm day after strong westerlies, there's often large numbers of auks and gannets and fulmars moving as they come like back out of the Baltic Sea. So some species are maybe surprisingly kind of rarer in Denmark. Puffin and shag are considered like notable species. And actually 30 years ago, Danish birders didn't think it was possible to identify cormorants and shags like at flight at a distance. But one birder, Rolf, who Dante will talk a little bit about later, he kind of like pioneered shag ID in Denmark, which is quite interesting. So now they're just considered kind of scarce. There's also a few black-browed albatross records from Skagen as well, including this individual, which passed pretty close by. In terms of skewers, Arctic skewers are the most common, and they're pretty much a daily occurrence from April onwards. But you also get smaller numbers of Pomeranian skewers, and in the spring, you also get sometimes these nice fully spooned individuals, which are always a treat to see. And long-tailed skewers move through in smaller numbers as well. We got really lucky in 2023 to see this individual like resting on the beach, and it was mobbing anything that came past, including this honey buzzard, which is a combination of species that I kind of never thought I would see. Gulls also pass through Skagen in big numbers, common gulls and black-headed gulls, and there's always big numbers of herring gulls and great black-backed gulls kind of like resting on the tip. Some cormorants. And they're mainly kind of commuting between Skagen Harbour and the tip of the peninsula here. So Skagen Harbour is the largest fishing port in Denmark. It's absolutely huge, and there's always stuff going on. So there's always loads and loads of gulls. And glaucous gulls and Iceland gulls are pretty much annual in March and April. Yeah. And then like most places, Caspian gulls are increasing. And we got lucky enough to see Caspian gull and Iceland gull side by side, which again was another cool combination. One of my favorite things to see migrating was the tits. They do actually move somewhere in Skagen. So unlike kind of British birds, which maybe are just more resident, you see these flocks kind of moving between the bushes and then cooling lots, and then they circle up really high and then just like head off to Sweden, which was pretty special. And we caught a Norwegian ring blue tit among many other recoveries when I was there. So it proves that they do actually go somewhere. And in Skagen, you also get the northern type long-tailed tits with their little snowball heads, which are fantastic to see. So we had a particularly special day in March, probably one of my favorite days of the spring. We were out doing our morning observations. I think we'd had a pretty good morning with some swans moving, some woodlarks, grey wagtails, some bean geese. And then we were just scanning through one of the scoter flocks, and Dante picked out this adult male king eider, which showed really well for birders over the next few days. So yeah, that was a great kind of start to the morning. And then a little while later, we heard a ticking bunting making a migration attempt. And it was actually a rustic bunting. And this was the first time that this species had been seen migrating in Denmark. Here's Dante's beautiful drawing of this rustic bunting. And then just to kind of finish off this like insanely amazing morning, we spent a few hours watching a humpback whale feeding off the tip as well. So all the counts that we make and all the data we collected gets entered into DOF Basin. And DOF Basin is like a centralized database. So nearly all the birders in Denmark use it and enter their sightings. And I don't really think we have an equivalent like this in the UK. Like if you wanted to know how many sparrowhawks were seen in Skagen on the 9th of May in a certain year, you could just super easily look it up. So I think it's a really, really valuable resource. And then in DOF Basin, you can see we have these green species, which are probably the equivalent of like WBRC rarity. And they have a committee which kind of adjudicates these notable or out of context sightings and scarce sightings. And then we also have the red species, which are SU rarities, which is the equivalent of like a BBRC. Okay, so back to the migration. Kind of heading on into April, finches start to move in like absolutely massive numbers. You can easily get kind of like 100,000 birds moving in a day. And I think this is probably the most challenging species, group of species to count. They move on such a broad front, like scoping out to sea, you can see them. Sometimes they move up super high as well. They're mainly chaffinches, but you do get good numbers of brambling and siskin as well, and redpolls as well. And then hawfinches, parrot crossbills, and serens move in smaller numbers. They're often either seen on migration attempts, like cooling, that's how you pick them out, or sometimes the parrot crossbills are seen on the deck, kind of around watering holes or small pools. And again, with the serens, they're often seen either migrating and picked out on cool, or sometimes you get resting individuals. So we had these two just hanging out in the campsite in the town. Thrushes are another group that move in big numbers in April. So missel thrushes kind of start off the thrush migration. We had a record count of 2,280 in March 2023. And fieldfare as well move in their thousands. This is like a big dispersed flock of fieldfare. And they're always really, really nice to see cooling and heading out. And it's also pretty special to see big flocks of ring ouzel as well, either migrating out or kind of like resting along the tip and in the reserve. Larks are another group of passerines that move best in, or move in the biggest numbers in March and April. You get good numbers of skylarks and woodlark as well. You can see over 100 in a day. And I mean, I personally don't see many in the UK, so that's really special. And smaller numbers of shorelarks as well, either migrating or quite often resting on the beach as well. So they're fabulous birds to see. I just wanted to include these nice pictures as well. You do get big flocks of snow buntings. They're often like very, very tame and approachable when they're just kind of hanging out on the beach. In terms of owls, shorted owl is definitely the most common. We had a kind of crazy experience where we had 18 resting together in kind of a 200-meter stretch of coastline. And long-eared owls, long-eared owls do get recorded as well, but they're likely massively under-recorded as there's just such a huge amount of habitat in Skagen for them to hide in. But Skagen is one of the best places to see snowy owl. We were really hoping to see one when we were there. Unfortunately, we didn't, but they do get seen fairly regularly. And they seem to provide amazing views when they're seen as well.
Okay, onto the birds of prey. or raptors, whatever you want to call them. Um, the reason why Skagen is probably most famous is because of the number and diversity of birds of prey. I've got a few pictures here of mixed groups. In this photo, we have three rough-legged buzzards, a sparrowhawk, some cranes, and mostly common buzzards. This would be a classic early April sight. In this photo, we have a mixed flock of honey and common buzzards. This would be typical in mid-May. And then here we have osprey, pallid harrier, and buzzard. This could occur anytime in April or May. So starting from sparrowhawks, these are probably one of the most common raptors to migrate in Skyen, peaking in April. Easy to get 100 in a day if the weather's good. They'll start first thing in the morning and migrate until the evening. Um, and when the thermals come, they'll migrate really high, and therefore they're quite hard to count as they're quite hard to pick up against the blue sky. But it's always special when you get nice close views along the beach first thing in the morning. There are several counts of more than 500 in a day, yet 1,000 has yet to be recorded. Goshawks are much rarer and mostly occur in March. These days, about 30 occur in the spring. Um, yeah, back in the 70s, you'd get hundreds each spring. No one really knows why they've decreased so much. But there was a record count of 49 in late March in 1976. Yeah, one of my favorite species, just amazing looking. Ospreys, like the sparrowhawks, will migrate any time of day. I remember seeing two migrating out. It was pretty much dark, really, in the evening, just going for it. Um, Easy to see 10 in the day in the right conditions. And yeah, I saw quite a few actually with this fish species, like migrating with this fish species. I think it's a garfish, but if anyone knows better, please let us know. Pretty cool to see. Harriers, probably why many birds visit Skyen is because of the harriers. Here we have a second calendar year pallid harrier. Um, the adult males start first, followed by adult females, and then second calendar years. And the peak time for harriers is late April, early May. You often see harriers over the sea. Um, and like the ospreys and the hawks, they will migrate any time of day and they can go really high as well. Marsh harrier is the commonest harrier. Um, yeah, here we have a second calendar year marsh harrier. Hen harrier, it's the second commonest harrier. The male is always special to see. I remember in my first year in 2018, scanning a flock of common gulls far over the sea, and I had a double take. I was like, "Oh yeah, that's a hen harrier just with the common gulls." And yeah, you get used to that kind of thing there. Um, yeah, here we have second calendar year and another second calendar year bird. And they actually had a count of over 150 in the 70s in a day. They are decreasing now, but I had a few days of over 40 birds. Pallid harrier, one of the best birds I've ever seen, adult male pallid harrier. These have gone a rapid increase in records. The first record was in 1975, and they were barely annual in the 70s, barely annual in the 80s and 90s. But in the last 10 years, there has been a rapid increase, and there was 95 plus in spring of 2016 alone. I think I probably saw 75 in the 3 Aprils I was there. Um, it's just amazing species. Here we have adult female, second calendar year, and another second calendar year bird. Montague's harrier. Unlike pallid harrier, these have decreased. So there are less records each spring than there used to be, and that reflects the status in the UK. There's less breeding in Denmark too, and there's none breeding in the UK anymore, at least to my knowledge. But nevertheless, in a period of crazy weather in 2023, we had actually the record count of Montague harriers. We had 12 in a day. This is a bit of a anomaly in the statistics. But yeah, pretty cool to see. And then I mentioned that a lot of birders come to Skyen to see the harriers. Thought I'd talk a little bit about the community, the birding community. Um, The Danish birding community is much smaller than the UK. It's like almost everyone knows each other. Um, and there's just overall less birders. There's a 100 kilometer coastline on the west coast with no birders. I would say there's nowhere in England or Wales with that kind of lack of coverage. Um, in our experience, the level of birders is very high. They're all amazing. Really good at picking out distant raptors, distant divers, and when you've got all these singing birds around you, picking out that one odd call. Um, yeah, just really amazing. I think I learned so much. In this picture, we have Rolf, by far the best bird I've ever met. He's been birding there for 30 years. He sits out there every day in the same spot. But he's pretty controversial. He's been banned from Doff Basin for questioning other people's sightings, and he's fallen out with the Bird Observatory. Um, he thinks that his count should be used instead of volunteers. He thinks his data is more standardized, and I guess he's got a point. The Fugal station has only been recording since 2017, and the observers are changing and the location are changing, whereas he sits in the same place every single day. But yeah, he's found the most bird species in Denmark out of anyone, and his famous find is Cinerus bunting, first for Western Europe. Learning Danish names, so it's very important to learn the Danish names. They have a an app called Zello, so you download it on your phone. It's basically a walkie-talkie. You just hold a button, you connect to the server, and my voice would come out. So I learned to say something like Sommerdrat, Gammel, Vidnebitlom, Trakendemud, Ust, Fran, Northstrand, Langdu. That means summer plumage, adult white diver migrating to the east from North Strand far out. This is important as a lot of the time the birds are migrating quickly. You can't ask everyone, oh, can you translate to English, please? Yeah, you want to know, you want to learn it in Danish so you don't miss any birds. Um, this became important, especially when rare eagles were being found. So, a bit more about eagles. The eagles, kites, and buzzards rely on thermals, start moving around 9:10. Most eagles do not migrate, um, but white-tailed eagle is an exception. Um, these birds will migrate out to Sweden. Pretty amazing to see them over the sea. I don't know if I said these. Yeah, these are the commonest eagles to occur in Skagen. Um, Golden eagle is the second most common eagle to occur in Skagen. Um, they actually nest in trees in Denmark. There's three pairs. And I was lucky enough to see three together one day, just stepping outside the observatory one afternoon. That was pretty amazing. Um, so yeah, a lot of the raptor migration spots are further south. So we do our morning observations right at the tip, but a lot of the raptor spots are south of the town, and they're very popular. And there's quite a bit of competition, like who can find the rarest raptor. Not who can find it, but people try and go further and further south to try and find them. But yeah, the peninsula gets gradually broader, so you're more likely to miss a bird. Yeah, we would normally just stick further north, but you can often miss the rarer birds as they turn around before they reach the tip. So a bit about a few rarer eagles. Here we have imperial eagle. So this is one of the rarer eagles for Skagen. I never saw the species. We never saw the species. Nine records in Skagen. Yeah, I think they look amazing, but never saw one. Great spotted eagle. There's 31 records of this species. They're one of the earliest to occur. Most of the rare eagles occur in May. Yet this occurs mostly in April, and there are a few March records. And this is another great spotted eagle with two red kites. I think it's amazing how the local birds are so good at splitting lesser spotted eagle and great spotted eagle. Here we have less spotted eagle, and they're very similar. Less spotted eagle has increased rapidly in the last 10 years. They used to be about annual. There's 74 records in Skagen. But yeah, these days there's over five each spring. There were between seven and nine in 2023 when we were there. And yeah, so a lot of the pictures in this presentation are quite close, but a lot of the birds you're seeing are quite distant. So here we have a less spotted eagle, for example. It's, a bad view, but this is typical. And a lot of the birders there would nail this straight away. Yeah, very impressive. Steppe eagle, this is the bird we saw in 2023, second calendar year. This bird actually overwintered in Denmark and returned as a third calendar year. We had a bit of a crazy cycling race with this bird. Um, yeah, eventually we got good views, but probably the maddest I've ever cycled trying to catch up with it. Yeah, here we have a third calendar year steppe eagle with an osprey. Um, Here is a adult Benelli's eagle, one of the rarest eagles to occur in Skagen. I think there's 6 records. There's been 2 Benelli's eagles that have been GPS tracked. One of these birds returned to Skagen 3 years in a row. So this map on the left was taken just before it turned up in Skagen, which would be right at the top. I couldn't find an image from when it had been to Skagen, but amazing that this bird flew to Skagen 3 times, and it's supposed to be in summer France. We actually dipped this species 3 times. Yeah, some crazy car rides with some locals trying to catch up with the species. This is said individual. Um, this is not a wild bird. This is a Steller sea eagle. And this had escaped from a zoo in Austria. This was seen in summer 2013. Um, yeah, I think the zoo offered quite a bit of money for someone to catch it, but no one managed to catch this bird. Crazy looking bill. Bird eagle. Um, 14 records of this species in Skagen. A real, like many of the species here, a real Skagen speciality. I think all of the spring records in Denmark are booted eagle are from Skagen. And yeah, many of the species we're talking about today, probably 75% of the records in Denmark in spring occur in Skagen. This is just one of the more remarkable ones. Short-hooded eagle, again, occur 21 records. This is one of the only species of eagle to have actually migrated. As I said, yeah, many just fly back and forth and never migrate to Sweden. I was lucky enough to find one in 2023 in the off season, so this was mid-June when most people have left. Yeah, most of the birds are there in April and May when it is probably the best. Luckily, 2 other people saw this bird, so this wasn't the only observation. Vultures. So there are 4 records of griffon vulture. 3 have occurred in the last 5 years, so increasing. I was lucky to see 2 of these. Again, yeah, never migrate, but the one in 2023 was with 5 white-tailed eagles, which was very cool to see. Bearded vulture, 1 record, similar to the UK individual. One parent was wild, one parent was reintroduced, so it wasn't officially accepted. And there is a record of Egyptian vulture. Back in the 80s, this bird actually migrated straight out to Sweden, and many people dipped it because they were banking on it to turn around and come back, like nearly all of the rare birds, nearly all of the rare raptors do. So only a few people have this on their Danish lists. Unfortunately, no photos. Um, so yeah, here we have a golden eagle with some buzzards. Like the corvids, counting the buzzards is extremely difficult. Normally the best days when you have easterlies for a few days period or a week, and then the first day of westerly, as the tip is like facing east, they have the wind behind them when the wind turns west, so you can get hundreds and hundreds in a day. There are several counts of more than 800 in a day, but these will no doubt be undercounts. So you have a flock of 100 overhead, it'll fly out over the sea, another 100 will come in, and then there's several flocks further south. And as this is happening, more are coming in off the sea, and it's just really confusing. And then it's just this conveyor belt of birds, and you really have no idea how many are actually involved. Um, yeah, so cheeky black kite bottom left here, but the rest are buzzards. Rough-leg buzzards, again, one of my favorites. Um, Unlike the other big raptors, these will just migrate. They'll just go for it. I hardly ever saw one turn back, and they're a nearly daily occurrence in April. They've actually decreased a lot. So in the 70s and 80s, there were many counts of over 200 in a day, but now you're lucky to see 30 in a day. Here we have a nice adult female, got a nice dark belly and a thick, solid tail band, just a single tail band. Here we have an adult male, multiple tail bands, a bit of a paler belly. And my favorite, the second calendar years, just more translucent and crisp looking, but they're all lovely. Another second calendar year rough leg buzzard. And then long leg buzzards, there's 10 records of long leg buzzards. Most of these are in June, so they occur much later. Um, yeah, I had a rough-legged buzzard in late June in 2023, and when it was really distant, I got excited as that's the confusion species, but it turned out to be a rough-legged buzzard. But yeah, I would have loved to have seen one of these. Um, yeah, they're called uh, ornithol in Danish, which means eagle hawk. So yeah, they're like I think apparently they're quite big. So yeah, honey buzzard. Yeah, can get big numbers starting in May, hundreds in a day. And interestingly, they will actually continue to migrate to Sweden until early August. So there's several counts of more than 50 in a day in late July and early August if the winds are right. No one really knows why this is. They're the only raptor to migrate at this date. Maybe they're non-breeders or third calendar year birds, but it's interesting nonetheless. Here we have common buzzard on the left, honey buzzard on the right. And then red kites. Red kite is the commonest kite. You can get big numbers of second calendar years in June, similar to Cornwall. Black kite is, as I said about skiing specialities. This is a proper skiing speciality in Denmark in spring. 95% of the black kites would be in skiing. Yeah, we have four here with a common buzzard. Um, Pretty much annual in good conditions. Um, there's a record of yellow-bill kite. This wasn't accepted as a wild bird. I think it was put in a category unknown. African species. I mean, highly unlikely, but probably not impossible considering some of the other species Skagen gets. Um, black shouldered kite. Is it black wing kite? Black shoulder kite. Um, this is increasing a lot. It's nearly annual now. It used to be absolutely mega in Denmark. There's 12 records. I think 10 of those are in the last 15 years or something. I was lucky enough to see two in 2019. Really cool species. Um, so falcons, kestrel is the commonest falcon. Um, yeah, like the sparrowhawks, harriers, ospreys, these will just nearly always migrate out. Do sometimes get feeding birds of the falcons, but yeah, nearly always migrate out. Sometimes far over the sea as well. Three lesser kestrels have been picked out, all males. No one has yet to identify a female. That would be very impressive. Um, Merlin's the second most common raptor. These kind of peak in late March, early April. Here we have a nice second calendar year male, some blue scapulars coming in. Another Merlin. Peregrine. This is a species which has increased a lot. Back in the 70s, you'd be lucky to get five in a spring, whereas now you can easily get five in a day. So it's good to hear that some of the raptors are doing well. There are a few records of Jaya and Seika falcon as well. Here we have Jaya falcon. Hobby, so they'll start in late April and carry on moving into May. You can get some big days with about 50. Here we have hobby on the left, kestrel on the right. And with the hobbies, you often get red-footed falcons as well. Um, I can't decide if I like the males or females more. Here we have a male with some kind of rodent. Um, Normally get about 50 in a spring. But sometimes you get influxes. So in 1992, there were 600 plus in the spring, um, which is remarkable for Denmark. This is again another Skagen speciality. Most of the Danish records of the species are in Skagen.
So, as volunteers at Skagen Fugl Station, we also took part in numerous other projects. And one of these was in collaboration with Aarhus University, and we were looking at the flight height of like large migrating birds. And they were interested in how much flight height they lost as they headed over towards Sweden, as they're thinking of building wind turbines on the Swedish side. So we spent many days in this little kind of caravan, which was placed in the outermost dunes. And we were using laser binoculars. So we would like shoot the birds with the lasers. And then from that, we could estimate the distance from us and the altitude as well. So that estimated flight height. And one of the best kind of bits of data we got from this project is we recorded an adult male pallid harrier heading out. And then they were doing an equivalent kind of scheme on the Swedish side. And we found out this pallid harrier made the 37-mile crossing to Sweden in an hour. So that's like an average flight speed of 37 miles an hour. Yeah, which is pretty impressive. And we were doing this for, large migrating raptors, cranes, swans, and kind of just other large birds that we could get with the lasers. So I mentioned that cranes they breed in the reserve in Skagen, and you also see them on migration as well. Skagen also has three records of sandhill crane, which is pretty cool, and one record of two demoiselle cranes. Bitters also breed in the reserve in Skagen. They breed in this like massive reed bed, which is kind of part of the ringing site. So most mornings when we were ringing, we'd see them kind of flying in and out of the nest to feed chicks. And they also got pretty defensive of their nest as well, anytime that like a raptor migrated past. Also see a fair number of white storks in Skane as well. They often don't migrate out to Sweden, so they'll just fly up and down the peninsula all day, which offers really, really nice views. And Skane also has black storks, probably maybe annually as well.
Okay, divers. One of my favorite groups and one of the groups I really struggled to figure out and identify when I first got there. They're nearly always flying. Only in certain conditions would you see them sitting on the sea. Red-throated diver, as seen in this picture, is the commonest species. It's easy to get over 100 in a day in spring, and there are several counts of 1,000 plus each spring. On calm days, they'll often fly high, so if you're just scoping the sea, you'll miss them. You'll have to scan several layers above the horizon with your binoculars. And this would happen with the other diver species as well. They can all fly really high above the horizon. Black-throated diver is the second most common diver species, and I just think they look amazing. Um, I love their black throat. Um, yeah, I remember seeing these seven sat on the sea, which was a very special moment. Um, Great Northern Diver, the other three species, so red-throated, black-throated, and white-billed, always migrate to the east, pretty much, whereas Great Northern nearly always migrate to the west. Um, they probably occur around every day in May, but again, real skin speciality, and they nearly always have their bills open. No one really knows why. Um, but yeah, they nearly always have their bills open. It's a bit weird. And my favorite by far, white-billed diver. Um, They're the rarest species to occur. I just think they look amazing. But they're not always easy to identify. It really depends on the light. So in this kind of lighting, you can see the bill just almost disappears. Um, and yeah, views are often worse than this. Um, Actually, I remember Rolf telling me that he thinks that white-billed diver is most easily confused with red-throated diver when it's distant. They both have proportionately small feet and thin and long heads, whereas black-throated and Great Northern are more compact and like stockier, more like bigger feet, thicker heads. I was shocked when he told me this, but I kind of know what he means. And here's just another example of how the bill can change in different lighting. The bill looks quite dark here, but it is a summer plumage white-billed diver. Um, we had a crazy day in late May in 2023. It was on the weekend of the Fugel Festival. This is an annual festival celebrating the birds. Yeah, so hundreds more birders descend on the peninsula, and there's talks and there's like stands and yeah, just people enjoying birds. Um, I think it was pretty foggy. It was on the Saturday, pretty foggy, so there was little like visible migration, but it became apparent quickly there were lots of divers resting on the water, lots more red-throated divers than normal, and pretty quickly this second calendar year white-billed diver was picked out. It's pretty rare to see this species resting in Skagen. Um, and then it kind of drifted around the tip in the current in about 30 minutes. And we had about 20 black-throated divers in the next few hours. That's a good count to be resting on the water. And we were joking that we would get a Pacific diver, um, as there'd been one in Norway and in Shetland the day before. So why not in Skagen? And amazingly, someone found a Pacific diver with the black-throated divers. This was just a second record for Denmark. Um, and then we were all like, where's the Great Northern Diver? We need to get all five species in a day. And Yeah, 30 minutes later, someone found a great northern diver. So all five diver species in a day. That can't have happened many times in Europe. Here's another picture of the second calendar year Pacific diver.
So Skagen used to get large numbers of waders, but I've talked about like the amount of habitat change in Skagen over the last 50 years, and kind of all this increased vegetation means there's less favorable habitat for waders. So often they're now just seen on migration. So in this picture is mainly greenshank and redshank as well. And April into May is kind of the best time to see migrating waders. And you often get fairly good numbers of spotted redshank as well, including gorgeous summer plumage birds. And you hear them calling on migration, and we even heard a few individuals singing on migration, which is pretty special. Wood sandpiper is another species which seems to sing on migration, like quite commonly. And we had an amazing day with over 200 individuals in a day. And you do still get smaller numbers of resting waders in Skyen. So we've got Dunlin, curlew sandpiper, and broadbill sandpiper here. And Skyen is one of the better places in Denmark to see broadbill sandpiper as well. And then you get smaller numbers of really nice waders as well. So there's sometimes dotterel resting kind of like in the moorland, heathland habitat. So May is also the best time for big hirundine movement. You get really big numbers of swallows and martins, and sometimes in these flocks you get red-rumped swallows as well. And in 2020, Skagen also hosted eastern red-rumped swallow, which I think is now a new species. So May is also the best time for large numbers of pipits moving. These are mainly made up of meadow pipits and tree pipits. But water pipits do winter in Skagen. They kind of rest around the pools at the tip of the peninsula. And red-throated pipits also get seen on migration as well. Skagen is a pretty special place for wagtail migration. You get absolutely huge numbers of yellow wagtails. So Thunbergi and Flava are the commonest subspecies, but there's a crazy amount of variation in these birds. So it's a really interesting kind of place to sort of study them. And interestingly, pied wagtail, so like the British race of white wagtail, is kind of considered notable or scarce, and people get like really excited about seeing them. But we were far more excited about citrine wagtail, which is annual in Skagen as well. My personal favorites are the bee eaters, and this is another like Skagen speciality. We get good numbers of bee eaters considering the latitude. I think we had 39 in 2023. And another kind of Skagen speciality, golden orioles as well. We had 29 in 2023. And you often see these flying up and down the peninsula, making migration attempts. And here is one attacking a jay. So May is the best time for grounded passerines. You get large numbers of wheatears building up in the reserve and large flocks of windchats as well. We had a memorable moment of like 40 windchats all just hanging out together in the reserve. And then a couple of hours later, they were gone. So they were just kind of like moving through. And then May is the best time in general for the warblers as well. The exception for this is probably goldcrests. We have the biggest numbers in April. We had a memorable day of catching over 200 and bringing 200. And then in with these goldcrests, you also sometimes get firecrests, which are always really nice to see. But yeah, the dawn chorus in spring in Skagen is absolutely incredible. There's just so many birds singing. You've got loads of icterine warblers, loads of marsh warblers, garden warblers, blackcaps, sedge warblers, and wood warblers as well, in slightly smaller numbers. And this is one of the warbler species that you actually see migrating out, which is pretty incredible. They kind of circle up high out from a tree and then just head out towards Sweden with confidence. So that's a pretty impressive thing to see. And another one that you might not think that you'll see migrating, but you do, is spotted flycatchers. Again, they kind of move down through the bushes, gain some height, and then head straight out towards Sweden. Collared flycatchers occur in smaller numbers. Dante got lucky enough to see this one in 2019. Unfortunately, there weren't any in 2023. But yeah, sometimes they do occur in Skagen. And red-breasted flycatchers occur in regular but smaller numbers, but they're always a treat to see. And then I just wanted to include this really nice picture of red-spotted bluethroat. So white-spotted bluethroats do breed in Denmark, but they're rare in Skagen. but red spotted blue throats occur as kind of scarcer migrants. Skagen is a great place to see shrikes. Earlier in the spring, you can get up to 5 great grey shrikes in a day. And again, they kind of like make migration attempts. And then a bit later in the spring, kind of into May, you get falls of redback shrikes. Sometimes you can go out and they're just like seemingly everywhere, and you've got like multiple in each bush. And rosefinch is another one that you fairly regularly see in migration. You can easily see sort of like 10 at a time. And then we had this gorgeous male singing in the town in 2023. So yeah, it was a real treat to actually hear them singing as well, as opposed to just kind of pinging overhead. So there have been too many passerine rarities in Skagen to kind of mention them all here. But some of the most notable are cinereous bunting, which I think was the first in northwestern Europe that Dante talked about earlier. Also had yellow-brow bunting as well. There's 2 records of Memora's warbler from Skagen, Asian desert warbler, which I think showed really well for birders, green warbler, and then near passerine, they've also had a record of mourning dove as well. So our other job as Skagen volunteers was standardized ringing. And so this meant we were ringing pretty much every day that we could. And nets were open half an hour before sunrise every single day. Unfortunately, in May and June, when sun rose at 4 a.m., this meant getting up at 2:15 every single day. But we did get to see a lot of nice sunrises. And the ringing site is mainly kind of wet reed bed interspersed with scrub. So this meant waders were necessary all year round. And unfortunately, because there's so much water, there are a lot of mosquitoes. The locals aren't fazed by this at all. This is a friend of ours, Eric, who took a lot of the photos we've used in this presentation. This photo actually makes my skin crawl, so I'm going to move on. But yeah, ringing in Skagen was a great opportunity to get familiar with like the molt and aging of a lot of species that I don't see very many of in the UK. So we've got crested tits, bearded tits, hawfinch, and crossbills. And it was also a great chance to catch some kind of scarcer or more uncommon species. Some of my highlights from the spring were catching blue throats. We ringed 10 wood warblers in 2023, redback shrikes, and Thunbergi yellow wagtail. But as we come towards the end of May and into June, the bulk of our catches were made up of acrocephalous warblers, so mainly reed and marsh warblers. I think our best day count was 18 in terms of that we caught and ringed for marsh warblers, and another 44 were singing around the reserve. So you really do get huge numbers in Skagen. And so catching all these acros, we thought we must be in for a chance of catching like a rarer acro, and luckily, this did happen. In mid-June, we were lucky enough to catch a Blythe's reed warbler and a paddyfield warbler in the same morning. So you've got the Blythe's reed on the left and paddyfield on the right. The paddyfield was a 20th record for Denmark. So a lot of local birders got to see that as well. And it was a really nice way to kind of bring our spring in Skagen to a close. So yeah, thank you so much for listening to us today and for having us here to talk. We hope we've inspired maybe some of you to visit Skagen in the future.
Thank you very much indeed, Lauren. Thank you, Dante. That was brilliant. Really, really enjoyable. Sure, there will be a few questions. I know you've said you'd be happy to answer any questions. So can I throw it open to anybody who is out there and has got some further inquiries about this wonderful place? And I'm sorry to have mispronounced it. I now know it's Skagen. Sorry about that.
So we're on.
Yep, got some questions.
Yeah, Lauren and Dante, thank you very much. Fantastic talk, brilliant. It's like Spurn on steroids, really, isn't it? It just seems absolutely awesome. Just at the start of the talk, you were showing big pictures of hooded crows migrating. So, do they move out of northern Scandinavia? And then where do they go for the winter?
Hooded crows, I think. No one really knows, but they build up in March and then most of them disappear. So they probably do migrate. I guess they've come. Are you talking about in autumn or spring?
I mean, when you saw them in the spring, did you
Yeah.
actually see them cross over into Sweden?
Well, you can't actually see Sweden. You can see one mast just the top of it, but you get the hooded crows, so you get a flock of 1,000 will migrate out and then they will come in.
Right.
So it's hard to know. sorry, you get, yeah, a flock go out and a flock come in, and then another flock will come in. It's just really confusing. So you don't really know if they migrate out or not. And also, there's very few ringing recoveries of the corvids. Not many people catch the corvids, so not many people know if they're yeah, if they're migrating. But they probably are migrating, yeah.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Thanks,
Did you
Steve.
manage to see the sandhill crane? Was that there when you were there at all?
No, I think there was one in 2020, the year after I was there, and then there was one this year.
Hmm.
So yeah, they've had three records actually.
Yeah. That was amazing getting the photograph of the Pacific diver next to the black-throated diver. Just seeing the sort of like contrast in the sort of shape of the bill and everything. It's awesome that. So that was a cracking photo. Yeah. So yeah, thank you. Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Steve. Thank you. Dante and Lauren, can I ask you about that centralized database? Could you say a little bit more about it? It sounded fantastic.
Yeah, so it's basically all the birders in Denmark use it, and you can put any sightings like migration counts, ringing totals, kind of what you've seen on your walk. And yeah, it's a free service, unlike Bird Guides, like it's not paid for. And it just kind of means you can look up any historical information that you wanted, any kind of data from like elsewhere around the country. Yeah, I think it's a really cool resource, and it'd be really nice, I guess, if we had an equivalent.
It would. Who manages and vets the information?
So DOF is it
I think it's government.
Yeah,
It's government funded,
it's
yeah.
Danish government. I think they invest quite a lot more money in kind of like conservation and birding and stuff than we do in the UK as a nation. So yeah, they have kind of a bit like eBird reviewers, I guess, like people who kind of adjudicate sightings if they're like out of context or like vast numbers. But yeah, it's government.
That's wonderful. Oh, great stuff. Any more questions?
We have a question in the chat. Oh, there's a couple of questions actually. First of all, Joel's asking, are there any records of chetties?
I can answer this question. Bit of a cheeky question from Joel, but I'll answer it anyway. So in 2023, I was walking along and I thought I heard a Chetty's warbler. Basically, I reported it as a possible. Quite a few birders came and we were thinking, oh my God, this is a Chetty's warbler.
First for Denmark.
First for Denmark, exactly, first for Denmark. And it turned out to be a branch. So obviously I was mortally embarrassed. It was two sticks going like this.
Like squeaking.
Like squeaking. But like everyone, it'd been 4 hours until we realized, I think maybe 50 birders had been and gone. And they were like shaking my hand. They were like, oh my God, you found first of Denmark. But it was a branch. Yeah, that was a interesting one. And actually, another birder claimed to have heard it 200 meters in a different place before me earlier on. That was Rolf. That's Rolf for you. But he's crazy, but he is the best birder. But he has a reputation for trying to claim people's finds. But
so yeah, no records of
no
from
records of
Denmark
Chetties
yet.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a comment saying absolutely breathtaking talk, so many species, thank you. And I'm not sure if this was actually answered, but when you mentioned, Nigel asked about the database, but so Amy's asking, are the records verified? I think that's relating back to that.
Yeah, they are. I guess similar to eBird, there's kind of like local kind of adjudicators, and they will question if you've seen a garden warbler in January or if you've seen thousands of species. Yeah, you'll be asked for proof and it'll be verified.
Thank you.
Lauren and Dante, does Blythe's reed warbler breed in Denmark?
No. They've actually only ever had 4 records in autumn.
Right.
I actually found that out recently, which is remarkable, really. They get maybe 10 in a spring in Denmark.
Yes.
But there's just a lot more scrubland habitat in Denmark than there is in the UK, and a lot fewer birders. So yeah, they probably only had 30 yellow-browed warblers all autumn in Denmark this year. Just goes to show how few birders there are there.
Yes.
Considering we've had hundreds and hundreds in the UK.
Yeah. Yeah. Any more questions?
Right. We have, well, another thank you for an amazing place to see so many different species, and thank you for the talk. And Lauren's asking, how do you get so confident in identifying birds when there's such differences in plumage, shape, etc., when they're moving so fast during migration? Is it just constant practice?
I guess, yeah. Yeah, we were very lucky that people were very supportive in Denmark. Like they see a lot more like divers, for example, and eagles than we do. Yeah, so definitely birding with better birders was like super, super helpful rather than like birding on your own. I guess it is just practice. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, I think you learn a lot from being with better birders. Yeah.
People who like, yeah, very confident and very experienced. And in general, I think, yeah, everyone's super happy to like take the time to explain and to teach, and that's invaluable, I think.
Excellent. Well, that's really good to hear. There's such a great community of bird watchers there, even if it's a smaller community than we're used to in Britain.
I guess the community feels bigger because I guess in the UK we're all like divided up into small groups, whereas there it's like one big group, if that makes sense. So you kind of feel it feels more of a community in a way, for me at least, anyway. Yeah.
So Lauren's saying thank you, very inspirational.
Can you perhaps just take this opportunity to say a little bit more about other bird observatories in Denmark? I understand there are some others. Are they closely linked with the work that's going on at Skagen, or are they all fairly autonomous? And also, secondly, can anybody visit Skagen, stay there?
Yeah, so yes, there's two other bird observatories in Denmark. They're all like funded by DOF, Basin, not by DOF Basin. DOF is Dansk Ornithological something in Danish. It means like Danish Ornithological Society. So one of the bird observatories is the most western point in Denmark, Blavand on the west coast. It's particularly good in autumn. Good for like Siberian species. And yeah, seabirds too. And then there's another bird observatory. I think it's one of the most southerly points in Denmark, Gedser, south of Copenhagen. And that's good in autumn as well. It's another bottleneck. They get quite a few raptors, and they ring lots of passerines too. But yeah, they're both more autumn observatories. Skagen is the spring one, and they're both quite a bit older than Skagen. But yeah, anyone can volunteer at any of the observatories.
You can't stay in Skagen necessarily in the same way you could stay at like Spurn. They have like the observatory and then like a little adjoining flat, and you can rent the flat out for a week. But you can't kind of visit for like 2 days. So I think a lot of visiting birders tend to stay in the town instead. But there's loads of like Airbnbs and hotels, and like it's very set up for like hospitality and stuff. So it's quite easy to visit as a place.
Okay, yeah. I was assuming you meant volunteering, Nigel, but did you mean like staying as a
just
a visitor?
Just to visit to enjoy the sights and sounds of that you've
I don't think any of the observatories have like guest accommodation. I think you can volunteer there but you can't stay as a guest. Or there's very limited accommodation.
Yeah.
But yeah, there is plenty of places to stay in Skagen and in the other observatories as well.
Well, thank you. Just before I thank you properly on behalf of us all, I just want to remind people that we've got another fab talk coming up next week by Silas Olafsson. Silas has spoken to us twice before, and they've been brilliant talks, fantastic photography, and like our speakers tonight, a real expert birder. Next week, he's chosen to talk about Tanzania, and that's another Zoom talk, so look forward to seeing everybody again then. But tonight's been fab. I really did enjoy that, Lauren and Dante. At the beginning, I described you as superheroes in terms of what you've achieved and found for us all on Anglesey this year. And I think tonight's talk has illustrated where your skills and experience have come from, and how they've been honed by literally hours and hours of hard work in the field. I think that came through really vividly in your descriptions of what you did and what others were doing in a similar situation. And it is just so commendable to have that passion and dedication that the likes of you, generally younger bird watchers, display in pursuit of your interest in birds, and the skills that you accumulate en route, whether it be pure identification, often in testing conditions, or bird handling and bird ringing, and then translating that into data acquisition, which is so important these days from a conservation point of view, and from standardized monitoring and scientific purposes. And you brought all that into your talk this evening, which made it, extra special. The images were great. I mean, there were some very memorable ones. I loved the little snowball-headed long-tailed tits. I loved the interplay of skewers and honey buzzards in the same picture, and the golden oriole seeing off a jay, as well as the more standard portraits. And you arranged it so that we could get a really nice comparison of so many species and so many different age classes and molts. And that was really instructional, and not often that we get such a variety of images on show in one talk, and so many birds that are relevant to us. So that was so useful. It was also just great to hear about the migratory behavior of birds that maybe we don't think of so much as migrants, like sparrowhawk. And I love the shots, that things like the short tail of that woodlark, those two woodlarks in flight was wonderful. That group of ring-ouzels, something that you probably wouldn't see in Britain these days. Loved the images of your original notebook, Dante, showing where it all begins in terms of acceptance of species. Getting that information down at the moment is so important. And it really was, as I said, a masterclass in particularly raptor identification, also divers, and being told to look up rather than just across the sea for divers. I hadn't realized that they can migrate at reasonable altitude as well. Well, you made it really come to life. Your descriptions of individual birds and birds en masse heading out from that peninsula over to Sweden or coming back the same way. You painted a glorious picture of Skagen as not just a bird observatory, but a fantastic habitat for birds, with its own community of birds engaging in wonderful dawn choruses, as well as that dynamic throughput of birds. It must be one of the most fascinating places in Europe to spend time as a bird watcher. And so glad that the likes of you have contributed to increasing the knowledge of that place and then communicating to the likes of us about it this evening. It's been splendid, really enjoyable. We take our hats off to you for your accomplishments, your skills, and for tonight's talk, which was beautifully put together, fantastic number of images, everything so well explained. That must have taken you a lot of time and thought, and we really appreciate that. So thank you for all of that, and thanks again for all your birding here in North Wales. Please keep up the good work. Don't go anywhere too soon. We need you. And I'm sure after your talk this evening, a lot of us will have our attention turned towards Denmark as a place to visit in the future. I'm sure we won't be disappointed. Okay, well, thank you again from all of us, and look forward to seeing everybody next week.